Most families enjoy the bliss of love and acceptance, but for more and more families today, something is wrong.
Why is she doing these things? Is this behavior normal? What's wrong with her? Nothing I try works. How can she be so different at home than for others? Is this my fault?
Something's wrong with your child or a child you care about. You can't figure it out. No discipline works. Or maybe you feel overwhelmed or rejected all the time. Maybe your friend or family member is suddenly angry or different since bringing this new child into their life. Maybe the child has seen a parade of doctors or has a laundry list of diagnoses, but nothing seems to fit. So you ask yourself, what's going on?
Children don't come into our lives as clean, clear, blank slates. This is especially true for children coming to us through foster care and adoption. These children have already experienced at least one loss, that of their birth mother, and may have suffered countless other hardships as well. Neglect, malnutrition, witnessing violence against themselves or those they love, verbal abuse, physical abuse, or exposure to drugs and alcohol in their mother's womb, and even biological children who have endured painful medical procedures or whose mothers were undergoing extreme stress during their pregnancy or postpartum depression after giving birth. These children too have experienced toxic levels of stress, known as early childhood trauma or adverse childhood experiences. Consider this. Current research tells us that infancy is the time a child's brain develops the fastest, and it develops from the inside out. In the middle, the midbrain is where the brain develops amazingly quickly during infancy and early childhood. This is where emotions are stored and processed in an infant or toddler's little brain before the language or discrete memory centers come on board.
So even though our babies can't tell us about these early experiences or recall specifics about certain memories, the memories are there as general feelings about themselves and the world. They can't use words to tell us about their traumas or put their traumatic memories into concrete descriptions, which actually makes it harder for them, and for us too, to make sense of their seemingly strange or often counterproductive ways of dealing with the world around them.
Healthy attachment to your primary caregiver, usually your mother, is critical for survival and healthy development. This diagram will explain how attachment develops. In a healthy attachment cycle, when an infant has a need, they express that need by whimpering and moaning if they're in pain, and they will escalate until somebody comes to meet that need. In a healthy environment, that need is met on a timely, appropriate, and consistent manner. Through this process, then, the child experiences relief, release, and gratification. After this process has happened for 100 times a day, the child learns to develop trust, emotional reciprocity, and learns that their needs are important, that they cry when they have a need and somebody comes and fulfills that need. Trust with others develops, particularly the primary caregiver. Through that process, a child gets the sense that they are important, that their needs are worthy, and that they as a whole are worthy. When a child is raised in an unhealthy environment, such as orphanages or an abusive home, things are very different, and this child's brain is going to develop very differently. For instance, when a child has a need, they're going to express the need, and nobody comes. So they're going to escalate, and still if nobody comes, or if the response to their need is inappropriate or abusive in some situations, the child is going to feel in extreme distress, and they are going to express that through additional crying and screaming and expressing that need more. And when that process continually happens over and over again, the child is left in a state of, I'm not worthy, my needs aren't important, and nobody is here for me. There isn't anyone to trust. And no one can live in that state of emotional dysregulation for any period of time. So they are going to have to find a way to self-soothe. Similar to, as an adult, if you get bad news and you cry yourself to sleep, that last before you fall asleep is pseudo gratification. It's not relief and release. The problem is still going to be there in the morning, but you're going to find a way to comfort yourself in the meantime, just as an infant or a young child will do. When a child grows up in that environment, they learn to not trust adults and that their needs aren't important, and the message they get is that they are not worthy and their needs aren't important. A child, an infant in this case, who is raised in an environment like that will have a brain that develops very, very differently.
What are some of the things that you would see in somebody struggling with attachment issues? A lot of different behaviors. It makes some intuitive sense, too, that if I've had damage done to me during the attachment years of 0 to 6, I'm going to be very, very nervous about things that otherwise wouldn't bother somebody who is healthily attached. So I might be really hypervigilant, always worried about my surroundings and whether or not I'm going to be in trouble, startle easily perhaps, or on the opposite side of the coin could kind of flatline, looking just really calm in the middle of a hurricane, because that's what they were used to in those early years, is just staying calm. Perhaps they needed to stay calm in order to avoid having more hurt come their way. So it can look like a lot of different things, but essentially you'll see a very different affective, emotional presentation to the outside world from that child than you would see from somebody who's not had disruption in the attachment window.
The thing about early childhood trauma is this: it impacts far more children than we realize, and in ways we don't easily recognize. Well, in 2006, research showed that 1 in 50 children had suffered from maltreatment or trauma. That number is so significant that the CDC and the American Academy of Pediatricians has actually listed early childhood trauma as a major public health problem. We like to believe that young children don't remember these things, and we also like to think as parents that if we just love them, enough, then it will solve all the problems. But actually the opposite is true. The younger the child was that suffered the trauma, the harder it will be for this child to overcome that trauma and for us to form a lasting relationship, a bond, an attachment with that child.
It's not always the case, but these disturbances can be most intense in the home, usually are. In fact, folks at school and other family members that are not in your immediate family will think that you just don't know what's going on. They'll question you as to why would you be looking for treatment for your child? It's such a pleasant young child, young girl or young boy. I don't know what the problem is. They look fine to everybody else, but the intensity at home is really quite off the charts. And frequently the recipient of the biggest pieces of anger and venom, the recipient of that is mom, which is a terribly sad thing. Mothers trying to do their very best to nurture and care for their child and getting nothing but really intense emotional reactions in return.
Well, you're dealing with a child that has a history of stress, a history of trauma, and attachment issues. That's a really complicated thing. It is beyond love. It is beyond great strategies. It's beyond our normal, natural way of thinking. And so we need to reassess and get some professional help to understand what this child actually needs. Well, family and friends come in and see what's going on or what you're describing to them. And, they're saying things like, all children act this way. Don't worry about it. They'll grow out of it. It's fine. You're overreacting. When things settle down, they get used to you, you get used to them. Then, you'll see a difference. Age will heal this. Time heals all wounds. And they're not seeing really what you're seeing usually. Typically, the child will act differently for different people, and it's usually the primary caregiver that gets the full spectrum of behavior, the full spectrum of what is actually happening. So other people are thinking, what's wrong with you? you're not getting it, and handing you books on how to positively parent your child, or good, how to parent the strong-willed child. And you're like, it's different than that. It really is. The other thing is that between parents and partners and married couples, there's a difference between the way the child acts with one partner versus the other. And so there's only one of you that's really seeing what's going on. Usually the child is sweet as sugar for everyone else, or for the dad, or for the mom, whoever, and then crazy for one of them, just totally acting out and off the wall. So it's very isolating. It can get you very estranged from people. And sometimes you withdraw simply because you think there's something wrong with you and you don't want to re-engage this.
Early childhood trauma is an epidemic, but attachment trauma, including RAD and developmental trauma disorder, are still not widely recognized by professionals and the public. Therapists and doctors who have little understanding of the impact of early trauma will often overlook these issues. Sadly, even some professionals experienced in adoption and foster care still don't recognize the neurological and developmental impacts of a child's early trauma experiences.
The thing is, when parents find ATN, the very first thing that they often say is, I am not alone. They find other people who are going through exactly the same thing as they are. Raising a dysregulated child is overwhelming, but it's even more so when you're raising a dysregulated child and you can't find answers. All the normal places that you go to, the doctors, your mom, your friends, are all offering you advice that just doesn't fit, just doesn't work for your situation. It becomes even more troubling for parents when their child looks fine to everyone else, and then the questions start coming like, why are you so angry all the time? Why are you so different than you were before this child came into your life? And pretty soon the diagnosis starts to look like you're a bad parent, or there's something wrong with what you're doing. A lot of these children look very, very healthy and normal to people who are not trying to build that close emotional bond. The flip side is true on some children that I call the equal opportunity dysregulated child, the one that looks dysregulated from the get-go. And those can be equally troubling because you're still not getting the right answer. The professionals and the people around you recognize there's something wrong, but they're quick to say a variety of diagnoses, ADHD or autistic spectrum, and the disorders don't exactly fit what you're seeing in your own home. And you know that. You sort of feel that in your gut. So you might try those things and they don't work. And then you go back to the professionals and you say they don't work. And pretty soon, again, questions about your parenting and about your own skill sets start to crop up. And sometimes people can go on a very long time looking and searching for answers and questioning themselves, and the situation gets worse and worse and worse.
The parents who are trying to love this child are not the problem. The friends and family offering heartfelt but ineffective advice are not the problem. The child is not the problem. The problem lies in the impact of this early trauma on this child's brain development, neurologically and neurochemically. There is hope and much healing that can happen, but until the parents find the right interventions and learn therapeutic parenting tools, things aren't going to change. Understanding what's going on with our children and the causes is the first step. Recognizing the neurological impairment these kids are afflicted with is also important. Working to build trust and change their worldview is paramount. It's hard work that takes a partnership between trauma-sensitive, attachment-focused professionals and dedicated therapeutic parents. Sadly, there are not enough of either in this world, but there can be. That's what ATN's Learning Center is all about. Created to provide education to parents and professionals alike to help our wounded children and families. You're invited to check out our resources, sign up for a webinar, or learn more about how the Learning Center works by visiting the About Learning Center page. Remember, there's hope for healing. At ATN, you're not alone.